Ciola Flannery from Till Payments, Alan Sen from Chipper Cash, and moderating the panel is Karen Cohen from Emerging Tech Talent. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Welcome, everybody. We are midway through the last day of Intersekt. Very excited to be here. My name is Karen Cohen. I am the founder of Women in Emerging Tech, and I also run my own HR consultancy in the emerging tech space called Emerging Tech Talent. So before we begin and introduce our panel, I'm just going to paint a little picture. Only 8% of developers globally are women. 19% of STEM graduates are women, and women leave the tech industry at 45% higher rate than men. And only 15% of Bitcoin buyers are women, and 12% of Ethereum buyers are women. So we're still in a situation where we've got a long way to go, and I'm really looking forward to introducing our panel about how we can address some of these issues. So I'll start with you, Irene. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you fit in.
Thank you for having me, Karen. And first of all, I'm very, very excited and happy to see that this room, there's a lot of like men to women. It's a great mix, which means we are all keen to build on diversity. So I'm Irene. I'm the founder and CEO of Lift Women Group. We are a female-led startup, Fintech startup, and we are Australia's first women-focused crowdfunding platform dedicated to support women to start and scale their business through like access to capital. And also the way that we help them raise capital is equity-free and debt-free. So it's like a product-based crowdfunding. And we support startups, scale-up, and small and micro businesses as well, as long as you are women founders. The reason why I started these projects last year during pandemic is because women hit the hardest through the COVID pandemic. And as Karen talked about the stat, I would love to share some shocking stat as well. You know, globally, only 2.3% of venture capital is actually invested in women-led startup. And when we talk about diversity, it's not only women or men. It's also about culture, different countries, nationalities. And women of color only get to 0.03% of global venture capitals. So I think there's a long way, as Karen said. So what Lift is trying to do is provide a safe place and accessible and possible tools for women to feel good to come forward and be inspirations for others and take a leap as well. And before starting Lift, I work in finance industry for 20 years. I work for the two biggest insurance company, AIA and Prudential. I manage the regional bank partnership across Asia Pacific. And I grew up in Hong Kong, and I came to Australia with my two little ones 4 years ago. And it was so to me, the diversity hit me really, first-hand experience because I'm a migrant, I'm a woman, and I'm working in the male-dominant insurance and banking and fintech industry. So looking forward to chat with you all today.
Thank you. Kiola from Till Payments.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Welcome. I hope everyone's not too tired at this point of the day. So as Karen said, my name is Kiola. I've recently started at Till Payments as head of engineering. My background is in software engineering, and I've really found my niche in being able to support and enable teams and lead them in their growth for their career and development. I have a strong interest, of course, in diversity in tech. I have spent quite a bit of my time, especially in the tech industry in Melbourne, focusing on community groups and supporting people in those communities, because tech can be quite an overwhelming place for people, especially for underrepresented groups in tech, and especially the intersect of those groups, as you mentioned, Irene. Some of the work I've done recently was across maybe the past 5 years was working on one of those community-led conferences, and I've spent a lot of time increasing the inclusiveness and the safety of those places for women and many other underrepresented groups as well. So look forward to chatting today.
Thank you. Trina.
Great. Thanks, everybody. And really appreciate everybody coming into this session. My name's Trina, and I'm the CEO founder of FD Global Connections, and a company I started in 2014, having left my corporate life. FD Global Collections, I work with Australian companies to launch into the United States. Why the US? I lived and worked in New York for a number of years, and I have a really deep and broad network in the US, and more specifically in New York. So, areas that we support businesses to scale into the US, we do audits on businesses to assess your scalability. We do market entry strategies. We support you with introductions to professional service companies to make sure that you're going to operate legally in the US. And I'm also flown into New York to do business development for my clients. I've also started a She Scales Global Network because women network differently. And so we run regular webinars. We also have events, which we're kicking off the first one after the pandemic for Spark Festival in Sydney in October. And we get together and just really learn from each other, talk openly with each other about the issues that women have, which are very specific. And as we've already heard, investment is a key issue. I'm also a company director, qualified with the Australian Institute of Company Directors. And a little bit later, you'll probably hear me talk about my experience as a female company director as well, which also is part of the broader diversity conversation.
Thank you. I think you've coined a new term now, webinar. Womenar? Women webinar. Webinar. There you go. We'll give that to you, Trina.
That was I'm going to trademark that, I think.
I love it. Alan.
Thanks for having me here. My name's Alan Sen. I'm Director of Revenue Strategy at a fintech startup called Chipper Cash. Sort of the way I describe what we do is we're sort of like Square's Cash App, but for the continent. So P2P payments, cards, we do some localized things like airtime and data bundles in certain markets as well. Sort of 6 million customers, 8 markets, relatively fast-growing fintech startup based on the continent. The context to why I'm sitting here today is actually many moons ago now, Karen and I started a program out when I headed up Stone and Chalk here in Victoria around women in fintech, and then also tied with some of the things that I think we'll be talking about today. I used to sit on the board of Fintech Australia, and during my time there, we sort of worked on a number of different initiatives around inclusivity, not only obviously from a gender perspective, but also thinking about inclusivity in quite a broad way. But yeah, I think we'll talk a little bit about some of those initiatives we ran many years ago that are still going really strong today. So yeah, looking forward to the conversation today.
Quite a pioneer in Fintech Australia. Thanks, Alan. So I guess I'm going to combine question 2 and 3 for our panelists for a little bit of time. So we've got a lot of tools in our toolkit to fix some of these issues. We can talk about quotas, we can talk about policies and procedures. So what are some of the tools that you have used that have worked, and what are some of those issues that you were addressing when you used those tools? And I'll start over here with you, Irene, again.
Sure. When we look about, before I talk about tools, I would always love to say like why we're doing encouraging diversity, why we need to empower women is because the impact that we're going to make. And then I think, and that's also the reason why I started Lift. And for the whole experience with Lift Women, I talked to over 300 women trying to start their businesses, and then wanted to know how to do it. And I found the biggest challenge is funding. And so one of the tools that I found really useful, which also I combined with the Lift concept, is an accessible platform that they can raise money. And especially when early stage startup, like emerging tech startup or emerging whatever startup, they couldn't get funding anywhere. So, and then especially for women, it's exceptionally hard. I don't know why, because the successful rate in borrowing loan from the bank is only 31%, way lower than men. And for crowdfunding, which is a very popular concept in US and UK, while in Australia, we are less than 5% market share. And also like women, only less than 3% projects are women-led. So there are a lot of reasons. And I found that how to make a successful tool is that tool or platform or whatever channel you want to offer to minority people, which, for example, women in tech, is that too has to be a safe place that they feel safe to come forward. And secondly, is that too, or platform or whatever, has to have successful story and inspirations that women can look up to. And so that's what we're building on Lift, and that's why I have confidence to say that this is two very important factors when you build any tools, and that's you got to get an accessible channel for them.
I love that you're building a platform. Apologies. So is that something that you have had to look, especially at the UX, before to make sure it's more accessible?
Yes, absolutely. I did extensive research around crowdfunding, around fundraising before I started Lyft, because as I said, I don't want to start something for the sake of starting it. You got to know what's the gap and what kind of solutions you're providing, and is it unique and is it going to help? So what I found is, for example, the biggest platform like Kickstarter in the US, it's very product driven, and when you log onto it, it's very masculine, I would say. And so, what we women is like, we don't feel safe or we don't have that confidence to jump on it and just start it. And you have to know women tends to have less confidence in asking or starting something, and so that's why Live Women have gained so much traction in a short period of time. Is because that space kind of let women see that things can happen and it feels safe to do it. And we are using a storytelling approach that to let people know our purpose and our impact rather than very product specific. So I think it's the approach. You're gonna when we talk about diversity, you're gonna know about what really in it for them and what their concerns are, and what's the barriers that they face, and tailor make the solutions to tackle it.
Fantastic. And I think you really picked up on that point of confidence when it comes to finance and applying for finance. Women aren't as confident. And so making something that's much more user friendly is a really great way to go. Well done. Kiola, tell us a little bit about what you think are the tools that we can use to help us with our diversity issues.
Absolutely, thank you. So I'll again start with the challenges that we're trying to address with these tools. A huge area that we see, especially in fintech, in this nexus of two quite male dominated industries, is a lack of women in leadership positions. So, a stat I can share with you all is, as part of the research done for the FinTech Diversity Radar, it found that only 4% of those in roles with of those titled CTO or Chief Innovation Officer, only 4% of those were women globally. So that's quite quite a strong statistic to start off with, but it's a strong area of interest of mine and also of Till's, and a huge area that we've been placing focus on. So what that means really is we focus a lot on like building diverse workforces and getting underrepresented groups through the doors. But a huge area that we need to start focusing on is around growing those people internally, starting to break those glass ceilings, starting to remove bias and acknowledge that there is bias in our promotion processes, how we grow people into leadership and how we keep them there. And acknowledge the different needs from different underrepresented groups as part of that. So some of the tools we've used around that is keeping very close eye on our pay parity. So we every year we get involved, of course, in the mandatory pay reporting. And Till are proud to say that at the moment our pay parity is 1.9%, where the average in Australia at the moment is somewhere around 22.8. And while there's pretty far to go, of course, and where we definitely don't claim to be perfect, we're proud at the strides we've made so far. It obviously hasn't been automatic. Some work a lot of work, in fact, has had to go into that around reviews on existing pay, reviews on potential candidates and people that we want to hire in. And some other things we've been putting in place is one initiative happening at the moment, and that's around removing that bias from our career frameworks and our promotion process. So acknowledging those at those contributions that especially women, but also obviously other underrepresented groups contribute around, say, glue work that wouldn't normally be in a traditional tech career framework, and acknowledging those extra areas of contribution that are required by teams to run successfully, but that aren't, maybe when you come to promotion stage or review stage at the end of the year, aren't something that generally get as much credit or get as much focus. Just in general, having a career framework tends to make the process a lot more objective as well, and having set guidelines for all your different managers internally and have a bit of consistency across the company. And yep, just I think once we start to look at implementing these kind of, they seem small when you talk about them, but they make a massive impact and difference to potential candidates and your internal, ours is our till force, which is what we call our people power. But it means that people know that the company really cares about them as a person, it cares about their progression, their development, and acknowledges those systemic biases that prevent them doing well, and taking strides to address those.
Fantastic. So much in what you just said. Like, you said they sound small, but they're actually enormous things. Removing bias from recruitment is a massive thing. Pay parity is a massive thing. Having a career framework that discusses things that aren't, just day to day, but really acknowledging diversity and other contributions to the workforce. And other things that we can do is around mentoring, making sure we've got mentors and sponsors. So not many people know the difference between a mentor and a sponsor, but a mentor can be someone from the outside that's helping you, and a sponsor is someone internally that's really helping you to get to the next level in your career or some level of expertise. And it's really great to try and strive for both within organisations. Okay, I'm going to hand over to Trina. What have you got in your toolkit to help us with our diversity issues?
Okay, so hands up those who believe that quotas actually are going to resolve diversity. Okay, I'm going to annoy about 90% of you then in the room. I want to talk about quotas because I was one that did not believe in quotas. And a number of years ago, I was approached as part of a quota system to join a board of an ASX listed financial services company. And I was a little bit miffed at that time about being put into their quota system because I didn't believe in them. But I wanted to experience it. I wanted to go through the process myself and learn about being in a quota system and what it actually meant. So I put myself forward, went to my very first interview, and within 6 minutes, I had decided I did not want to join that board. Why? Because it was purely about numbers, and they had not done any work leading up to that point about other alternatives that we've just heard in supporting women and other minorities to get onto their board. So, but what it did give me was a really interesting insight. And that insight is that it opened a door for me. It opened the opportunity for me. And even though I had decided not to join that board within 6 minutes, I was in the empowerment seat. I was the one that had made that decision. So it was actually very empowering from that perspective. Fast forward a few years, again, I was put forward for a board, non-executive director position for a board, and I put my hand up and said, yep, happy to go through that. So 6 months, due diligence. I was appointed to the board, and I'm still on that board, and I'm very happy to be on that board. And the reason was that business was able to demonstrate all of the different initiatives that they had implemented over the years to get parity around diversity at director and at senior executive level. And for me, going through due diligence and seeing that was a really positive experience. So when you think about quotas, I think take my lessons around learning what it really does mean. It means that the door is open and it's up to the minority, as I consider myself on boards. it's up to the minority to then decide whether or not they want to take that position based on what they learned during the due diligence or a very short meeting. So quotas, I think, are a good thing, but they're not the first lever that should be pulled for an organisation, but they're certainly part of the toolkit.
Thank you. And I think I don't know if you've all heard of the Champions of Change, but they have a initiative called the Observership Program, where you can go and join a board just to watch. You don't get to vote, and see what it is. And maybe it's not so scary then to put your hand up and say, "Hey, I want to join a board," because I've seen what happens, and it really is just like another executive round meeting with a lot more diligence, obviously, but. I'm sure Trina might think there's a lot more to boards, but the idea of, we can all put our hands up, and I love that observership program because I think it gives us a bit of confidence. Alan, sorry, Trina, just going to head over to Alan, then I'll bring back, sorry.
Yeah, so I'll take a big step back, and I think everyone's touched on it on the panel, which is tools are in service of an outcome, right? And so to me, it's almost like from a practical level, and I'll use Fintech Australia as the example here. When we were thinking through how do we bring more diversity, we took one step back and said, well, what do we mean by diversity? What are we trying to actually achieve as an outcome? And then let's reach into the toolkit and look at what's available to us, right? Because there's no use reaching into the toolkit and pulling out a butter knife when you need a drill, right? And so it's really in service of what is the outcome. So from a Fintech Australia perspective, when we looked at what diversity meant to us at an early stage in the organization's history, it was really understanding, we've heard some of the stats around engagement of females in the fintech space. At the time, it was less than 20% of all employees in a fintech startup, much less obviously at a founder level, were female. And so that was one area that we really wanted to champion and set an example. And then the other piece to it was, this doesn't necessarily often fall into the bucket of diversity when people think about it, but in the context of Fintech Australia, all we wanted was diversity of views that weren't just Melbourne and Sydney, right? And that was really important to the organisation at the time, which was if we want to be a Australia-wide organisation, that we encompass views from other parts of Australia. Again, sort of not typically what a lot of organisations think about in the context of diversity, but again, in Fintech Australia's case, that was something that was really important to us because we had a board that was just Victoria and New South Wales. And that really didn't reflect what the member base we hoped would look like going forward. And to an extent at the time, that was the member base, but we really wanted to champion an Australia-wide organisation. So again, it's a step back and saying, what do we mean by diversity? At the end of the day, for us, it was diversity of views because we wanted to make the best decisions possible, right? And to me, that was a core element when we sort of reflected on what I think has helped to, we're all here at Intersekt today, enjoying Intersekt, has helped to build out the organisation to what it is today, right? I think that was a major part of it. Lots of diverse views about how the industry and the organisation could grow. And so, from a practical level for people in this room who are thinking through, how do we build a diverse set of views in our business to obviously, empower certain groups, but also to empower the business to start to think in a different way. You're not going to think in a different way if you've got 4 white guys in the room, but you're not going to think in a different way if you've got 4 white women in a room, right? And so you want to expand the aperture as to how you think about things. And that's where I would start. What does diversity mean to us as an organization? And how do we then reach into the toolkit to think about what tools we want to use to work towards that outcome? And for us at Fintech Australia, I'll jump to the end and I'll throw it back to you, Karen. What we did was we took a strong form view around those 2 particular elements and we embedded that into the Constitution, right? So we went all the way, right, and said we want to have a strong view around how we do this going forward. So we set minimum numbers for maximum numbers that could come from a state and minimum numbers of female directors on the board. So that's where we landed. Because we wanted to just pull the hardest lever we could to really embed this in the organisation's DNA.
We're coming to the end, as you can hear from the clapping next door. We had so many more questions. We could talk about this all day. One other point I'd like to make before I thank our panel is that the Champions of Change have a panel pledge. It's really simple. You can add it to your website. You can look at your panels. When I was asked to help with today's panel, I made sure that we did have a diverse panel, and it's something that we all need to take. So I encourage you all to take the panel pledge, and I don't want to see any more panels. And thank you very much to our speakers today, and look forward to seeing you all at the rest of the Intersekt Festival.
Thanks, Karen.
That went very fast.
Thanks, everyone. Feel free to head out for lunch and we'll be back at 1 p.m.